Good afternoon. Welcome into Week 10 of the 2021 Missouri football season. Gabe DeArmond here on the pregame call, brought to you as it is every single week by Call and Gentry Law Group in Jefferson City. Mizzou and South Carolina getting set for kickoff here in 90 minutes, 89 minutes now, at Furrow Field, 3 p.m. on the Scce Network. If you're listening, Tiger Radio Network. Mitchell Forty, who will be along later in the show, will have full coverage during the game at powermizzou.com, and also some pregame coverage for us. As I said, he will join us a little bit later on the show. We are going to lead you up to kickoff, as we do every single week here for the Mizzou football season. Just 2 more to go after this one, so we are already kind of nearing less than 2 weeks left in the college football season, at least the regular part of it. More may lie ahead for Missouri. That's going to go a long way toward being determined today. Appreciate all the comments that you guys have. They're building up over there. We're going to get to them in a minute. Would ask you guys, while you're here, to hit the like button, subscribe to the channel, which will allow you to get a push alert when we go live with the postgame show, which should be somewhere around 6:30 tonight, but you never know. Could be a little sooner, could be a little bit later. So if you subscribe and get that push alert, you're going to know when it is without having to just sit in front of your computer or phone for 15 minutes after the game ends. So before we get to the game today, the quarterback situation, other weird things happening across the Southeastern Conference right now, do want to once again call your attention up there in the upper. It's probably the left-hand side of the screen as you're looking at it. I'm not sure. I think it's mirrored as I'm looking at it. But either way, that little blue rectangle that says Call and Gentry Law Group, that is our sponsor every single week for this show. Call and Gentry, available online at callgentry.com. You can go right to that website. They have an online chat. You can schedule a consultation. You can call them at 573-691-4552. Getting in touch with Jason Call, Chip Gentry, Emily Fretwell, Nick Leslie, Sheila Schill, Susan Draffin, Jody Dupuis, anybody down there. I hope I pronounced Jody's last name right. But they can take care of virtually anything you have as far as legal needs. They've taken care of a number of things for me, contracts and such, over the years. And always first-rate customer service. They're always going to take care of you quickly. And they will do their best by you. So once again, 573-691-4552 or online at callgentry.com. You can go there to get everything done. All right, so the question for everybody is who's playing quarterback for Missouri. And I can tell you that Mitchell Forty just got to the stadium. Missouri is not on the field for warm-ups yet, so obviously we don't have any updates from the stadium yet. In about an hour, Mitch is going to call in, and we'll talk to him about what is happening there. But here is what Mitch posted at 8:25 this morning. This is kind of a combination of information he and I got over the course of the week. I'll just read it to you. I think most of you have probably seen it, but just in case. It doesn't sound like Connor Bazelak has been ruled out at this point. If he's able to play, we expect him to start. It sounds like Brady Cook has been told to be ready to start if Bazelak can't go. Not out of the question. We could see Cook rotate in some, even if Bazelak plays. If not, would expect maybe a little bit more for Tyler Macon. And about 45 minutes after that, I believe Pete Thamel tweeted that Bazelak was a game-time decision. So here's where we're at with quarterback. It is possible Connor Bazelak, with a hamstring injury, is playing today. Yeah, it is also possible that has not yet been determined. Missouri should take the field for warm-ups in 30, 40 minutes, something around there. And at that point, I think it's going to be a very much, how do you feel, can you do this? I would expect Connor Bazelak is going to give it a shot, but I don't obviously know that. Point is, if Connor Bazelak is healthy enough to play in the next 85 minutes, he's going to be Missouri's starting quarterback today. If he's not, Brady Cook is going to get the start. Eli Drinkwitz said earlier this week that it just wasn't reasonable to prepare 3 guys to be the starter, so they were going to have to make a decision pretty early on who would play. That decision has been made. It's Connor Bazelak, it's Brady Cook. are the guys that they are prepping to play today. That does not mean it's impossible that Tyler Macon sees the field. Not at all. Could be a situational thing. Could be maybe on a certain series or a goal line package or whatever. But if Connor Bazelak is healthy enough to play, not healthy, because Drinkwitz said on Tuesday he's not 100%. But if he's healthy enough to play, we feel pretty good he's Missouri's starting quarterback today. Now, again, we don't know when that determination will be made. What we were hearing as of last night, this morning, is the coaches are Missouri is leaning toward playing Connor Bazelak, starting Connor Bazelak. But he's going to have to go through pregame warm-ups and just see how things feel. Look, I think everybody on here at some point has had a hamstring issue, and they don't go away easily. And they don't really go away without anything other than total rest. And you can think it's okay and then go out there and all of a sudden it's not okay, right? And I don't think that the hamstring injuries you and I have that we're trying to get good enough to run, 7.1 miles an hour on the treadmill are quite the same thing that Connor Bazelak is dealing with to go play a Division I football game. So I think it's one of those, one of those things that really he could feel fine, then he could go through warm-ups and say, yeah, I can't do this. We could tweak something. So Brady Cook is going to be on alert to be the number 2 guy today, and that is where we stand with that, to be quite honest. And, Adam here brings up a fair point, and it is one that I don't necessarily disagree with, and stick with me here while I get the graphics off my face, but says it's crazy to me that the coaches think a hurt Bazelak gives us the best chance to win. I would start and play Cook. And here's, again, I don't want to say that coaches can never be wrong. I have said over and over, I would have played Brady Cook and Tyler Macon against Tennessee. I would have done it against Texas A&M. I would probably also start Brady Cook today, to be quite honest. But we have a fraction of the information the coaches have. They have literally multi-million-dollar jobs riding on this, and it is their decision to make. Now, we can disagree with it, and maybe in the end we will be proven right. I'm not saying that nobody can disagree with it. I'm not saying a $4 million salary makes Eli Drinkwitz right all the time. But I also think, and I want to bring up another question here, which I know was a joke, but there's a point to it. T-Rise says, how much better is Cook than Macon and Bazelak? So we have seen Connor Bazelak play 18 games, right? And the last 4 have almost inarguably been his worst 4. He hasn't played well in the last month. Nobody is disagreeing with that. I am in no way saying that Connor Bazelak has played well, and I think he's a great quarterback and all that. But you have some idea, baseline, what to expect out of him. And the reason that the backup quarterback is always the most popular guy on every team is very simple. We've never seen him fail. That's it. I mean, even last week, when frankly, there were times that both Brady Cook and Tyler Macon failed. It was, yeah, but it's Georgia. That doesn't count, because Connor Bazelak would have failed too. And he probably would have. Now, would Bazelak have put up 12 points or no points? I have no idea. But last week was a situation where nothing that happened was going to change anybody's mind. As I wrote on Monday morning, it was confirmation bias. Whatever you went into that game thinking you were going to see or wanting to see, it's exactly what you saw. So in everyone's mind that is wanting to see someone else, it's not in favor, it's not pro Brady Cook or pro Tyler Macon. It is very simply, I just don't want to see the guy we're seeing. I want change for the sake of change. And again, maybe it would work, right? Maybe Brady Cook starts today, and we talked about this a lot last week. What if Cook or Macon starts today and beats South Carolina? Then what do you do against Florida? And we'll talk a little bit about Florida in a minute. So obviously a lot of things at play here. But we just haven't seen Macon or Cook fail. I mean, if Brady Cook starts today and we're mid-second quarter and Missouri's got 37 yards of total offense and 1 first down, then all of a sudden the shine's off. And I promise the board is going to be saying, well, I want Tyler Macon, just because you then haven't seen him fail. The coaches pretty clearly, based on what we've been hearing through the week, believe that at whatever percentage he is, whether it's 50, 70, 95, I have no idea what percentage Connor Bazelak is at. Only he and the doctors and the coaches know that, and I'm not even sure all those people know it. But whatever percentage he is, it seems pretty clear to me Eli Drinkwitz thinks Connor Bazelak gives him the best chance to win a game. So there's a couple ways to look at that. One, maybe he's wrong, right? I mean, that's a possibility. We've talked about that. Maybe he's just wrong. The other thing, and I think this should be the most concerning, well, number two, maybe he's right, but I think this should be the most concerning thing for Missouri fans going forward. Whatever percentage Bazelak is at, let's say it's 75, just to pick a number, and the way he has played the last month, if Eli Drinkwitz thinks that Connor Bazelak is the best option they have, it is a little bit concerning about what else you have, at least for the rest of this year. Doesn't mean Cook and Macon couldn't get better over an offseason, but if the Connor Bazelak that we've seen play for the last month is, in the coach's eyes who see everything, their best option, yeah, it's a little worrisome, guys, because that Connor Bazelak hasn't been good. And again, I would have liked to see Cook and Macon against somebody other than Georgia to have maybe a little bit better idea. As I said, coming out of the Georgia game, I don't know how you could watch that game and think anything but, hey, if Bazelak can't play, we got to go with Cook. Obviously, that's what the coaches seem to agree, because that seems to be the plan. I just don't think Tyler Macon is there yet, other than a situational guy. So it'll be interesting to see. My expectation is that Connor Bazelak starts today, unless at some point in pregame warmups he just tells Eli Drinkwitz, I can't do it. Or if Eli Drinkwitz sees something and says, you can't do it. Now, will he be on a short leash? What's that? I don't know. I don't have a clue. But my expectation is, if he's healthy, if he says he can play, he's going to be the starter. We will find that out, obviously, in about an hour and 15 minutes. Mitchell Forty going to call in, like I said, at 2:30 from Faroe with kind of an update. And if he gets something before then, I don't think Missouri would make an announcement, but if he sees something like Connor Bazelak comes out on the field in street clothes, he's going to let me know, and we'll pass that on to you guys. I don't think that's going to happen. I would expect Bazelak at least to be in uniform and to give it a go in pregame warmups and see where they stand. So, once again, appreciate all your guys' questions, comments, all that. We've kind of gotten a format down on this show. So what we're going to do here in just a minute, I talked to Chris Clark, who covers South Carolina for Rivals.com a couple days ago. We're going to play that interview for you. We're going to come back, take some of your questions, look around the SEC a little bit, and then we'll talk to Mitch. We will lead you up as close to kickoff as we can here, probably 2:45, 2:50 in that range. Get you set for Mizzou and South Carolina at 3 o'clock here on the pregame call presented by Call and Gentry Law Group. But keep letting the comments, the questions build up. As soon as we're done talking with Chris Clark, we will get to him, have a little back and forth here before we talk to Mitchell Forty. So here is my interview from Thursday afternoon with Chris Clark from Gamecock Central. Look up and find it there. And now on the screen is Chris Clark from Gamecock Central. And Chris, the most important thing, man, I mean, it's the Mayor's Cup. It's the biggest trophy in college football. It's that time of year again.
Yeah, it is, man. Actually, I don't know if any guys have talked about the Mayor's Cup over there. There were some I can't remember if it was A&M or Missouri, maybe even both. Some of the coaches didn't really seem to know that there was a trophy involved.
Right.
I think there's one for the A&M game. The only trophy related memory that I have was that 2013 game where Connor Shaw came off the bench, led them to the victory after they were down 17-0, and there's that kind of shot of him holding that trophy. Other than that, not exactly, the most prestigious trophy in the world, but nonetheless, hey, it's an important game for both these teams, I would say still.
Yeah, I honestly had forgotten there was a trophy until Eli Drinkwitz said earlier this week, "Hey, there's a trophy on the line," and I don't know if he said that like seriously or kind of mockingly or whatever, but no, you're right. It is a big game. Certainly Missouri has to have this one almost to get bowl eligible. I think. I mean, they're 4-5. They've got Florida and Arkansas left. The likelihood of winning both those games if they don't win this one, I think, is pretty terrible. And South Carolina, you mentioned Connor Shaw. Somebody asked us on our show yesterday, who is South Carolina's quarterback? I said, I think it's not Connor Shaw. That's all I know about it. So they played like 9 different guys. Who is their quarterback for this one?
First of all, can verify it will not be Connor Shaw.
That's the best news Missouri fans have heard all week.
Yeah, unfortunately for South Carolina, fortunately for Missouri, he is still on staff, but he does not have an extra year of eligibility, so they will not be able to pull him from his current team role like they did with Zeb Nolan. No, you're right. Beginning of the year, it was Luke Doty. He got injured in preseason, so he missed game 1. They go with Zeb Nolan ultimately, and now it's been Jason Brown. Zeb Nolan was banged up in the Texas A&M game. He had a small meniscus procedure. After that game, missed a lot of practice time. And, Jason Brown may have gotten a shot anyways. That certainly accelerated it. And so they went with him against Florida. Obviously, the Gators have problems, Gabe, as we've seen, but South Carolina played far and away their best game against those guys last week. And Jason Brown had a really good game. We kind of saw, we call it the Jason Brown experience here in Columbia, which has a lot of interesting components to it. And he showed the absolute best of that. And he took care of the football. So he'll be the guy, second game in a row. Transfer from St. Francis, which is an FCS program. South Carolina got him and the big receiver, who's his best friend, E.J. Jenkins. They got those guys out of the transfer portal on kind of a package deal. So it's Jason Brown's gig on Saturday again.
All right, so I said Missouri needs this one to get bowl eligible. South Carolina, I feel like it has to have this one really to have a chance to be bowl eligible. They host Auburn next week. They host Clemson the week after Thanksgiving, and we all know Clemson's not Clemson, but they're still not bad. I mean, again, the chances of losing this one and winning both of those two seem virtually impossible. So I jokingly called the Tennessee-Missouri game earlier this year the Duke's Mayo Bowl, but this is like the battle to go to the Birmingham Bowl here. The winner has a shot, the loser has no shot to go to a bowl.
Yeah, it's going to be really difficult. I mean, and look, what a difference a week makes for South Carolina because, after the A&M game, they played so poorly in that one. And people kind of were assessing the season and saying it's really going to be tough to get to that 6-win mark because what's your schedule? It's Florida, it's Missouri, it's Auburn, and it's Clemson, as you've laid out. You need to steal a game somewhere. And they've done that. They kind of stole that Florida game, maybe not as much of a theft as originally thought based on how poorly things are going down in Gainesville. But nonetheless, an impressive win for South Carolina given the circumstances. And so this is one of the games. Some of these games have shifted from what we thought they'd be early in the season. For instance, that Clemson game, beginning of the season, you would have given Clemson a 99% chance, even on the road, of winning that game. Now they'll be favored probably, not by as much, right? So there's been a lot of different shifts in the perception. The Missouri game has always been thought of as a swing game, and I think that's still the case.
Yeah.
Even though we have a 9-game sample size of both these teams, still a very important game. And if they can get this one, you've got it made as far as bowl eligibility, and the rest is gravy.
Yeah, no, I don't. Again, I want to be careful not to take too much credit away from South Carolina because, look, even if the other team's down, you've got to take advantage of that, right? I mean, yeah. And South Carolina deserves credit for doing so. But if you are just an impartial observer on Saturday night, I didn't watch that game because by the time I knew it was going to be worth watching, it was 30-10, and it wasn't worth watching anymore. But if you're just an impartial observer, you're watching that game, was that game more about South Carolina playing well, or has Florida just quit?
That's been probably the most common question we've gotten. It's a question I've asked myself during the game multiple times. What is this about? I hate to give the cop-out answer, but honestly, after rewatching it, assessing everything, I do think it's some of both, right? I mean, both the teams came in with the same record. They're 4-4, but totally different feels. South Carolina, and I think actually Shane Beamer and his staff deserve a lot of credit for this. Even in games where they were getting blown out, Tennessee, A&M, the team didn't quit. You never looked at the team and said they've lost the locker room. There's an effort problem. They still played hard. They came into the Florida game motivated. They played better. They looked like they wanted to be there. Florida did not. Right? They didn't play very well. Fired their offensive line coach and their defensive coordinator right afterwards. Players weren't engaged. It wasn't good. There's supposedly some flu going around on the Florida team, right? That said, South Carolina beat Vanderbilt by 1 point. That's a team that's got problems too, mainly just from a roster standpoint. They struggled against Troy. They eked one out against ECU, right? Like, this isn't a team that set the world on fire against anybody. They came out and dominated Florida basically from start to finish. And I think in that we saw some of the things that, like, for instance, if nothing else, we thought the South Carolina team would have a chance to be maybe serviceable on offense going into this year. They haven't been able to run the ball all year with that offensive line that returned some starters, 4 starters, and 4 really good backs. We thought at the minimum they'd be able to run the ball. They haven't all year. Well, against Florida, they did. And I think some of that was about Florida. Some of it was about schematic tweaks that South Carolina made, little things. And some of it was about they just played better, right? Jason Brown gave them a spark. They ran the ball better. They took care of the football. I think it was some of both. And so the key for them is, can they put together back-to-back weeks? Can they go to a Missouri team that, while they've, in my mind, improved defensively, can they go out and run the football again? Can they put together back-to-back performances?
That there's one guarantee in SEC football: Dan Mullen will always have a reason it wasn't his fault. Damn flu really hurt Florida in that game.
Yeah.
So you mentioned the running game, and I mean it's been a little bit like like the quarterback game for South Carolina. I mean, it's a committee thing. I mean, nobody for South Carolina has 100 carries yet. I understand Kevin Harris is kind of the guy, but I mean, he's not even right now this team's leading rusher. So, and he led the SEC last year. So what's that kind of evolution been like throughout the year? And nobody's averaging 50 yards a game, but like you said, they just went out and put 200 on Florida.
Yeah, and that has also been kind of a complex animal as to why it's happened that way. Beginning of the year, Kevin Harris, big expectations on him again after having 1,100 yards last year. Wasn't healthy at the beginning of the year, had a minor back procedure. They held him out against CIU. It took him a while to get integrated. The first game that he really was back, in terms of carries, Georgia, So, I mean, that's kind of, you can play Georgia, and that's not going to be your best showing on auto. And so they played him. Zaquandre White had a really good spring. He's kind of one of the leaders of the team in terms of just vocal leadership, and he's been really good for the most part. Now, the offense in general has struggled. The run game has really struggled, but Zaquandre White, I mean, for some time, he was the leading rusher, really on the strength of his week 1 performance. He was the leading rusher for several games, even after he hadn't gotten carries in like 3 straight games. Juju McDowell is a freshman, a smaller change of pace back. He was the guy for a little while. He took over the 4th quarter against ECU. He played some. Marshawn Lloyd, former 5-star, just took him a while to get reintegrated, and he had his best game, I think just 7 carries against Florida, but broke off a long 50-yard run, I think it was, and he just got his knee brace off during that bye week. Looked like a different guy. So could it be coming together? I don't know, right? I mean, all 4 backs did play. They played Juju McDowell on the Wildcat. He scored a touchdown on that play down in the red zone. I think, look, first guy out there, I still think it's going to be Zaquandre White, just based on what we've seen lately. And he had a really good game against Florida. But there's probably room for all guys, as long as there's enough snaps, as long as they're staying on the field, probably room for all those guys to play a little bit of a role.
You kind of alluded to it. I mean, the thought around here is, I don't know, Missouri played its best game against the run at Georgia, and that's an unusual team to have played your best game against the run against. But same time, they gave up 337 yards passing. So, is this we don't know if this run defense is fixed or not. I think we'll find out a little bit more about it this weekend. What have, Shane Beamer and his staff said about facing a team that literally until last week was the worst run defense in America? I think they've moved up to like 128th or something, maybe, basically based on holding Georgia down to 170.
Well, that really stood out to me. I've mentioned that on GC Live, our streaming program this week, Gabe, is that I was kind of jarred by watching the Georgia Missouri game about how Georgia couldn't run the ball, between the tackles really against Missouri. But for Beamer and his staff, the word that they've used a lot is they've talked about how Missouri's improved. They're really hammering that home about how they've improved, and I think they probably got that in mind. I think they're probably pointing out to their players that don't get caught up in what was it, Southeast Missouri State or whoever they gave up 9 yards a carry to earlier in the season. That's not the same team. Now it's the Missouri team that just last week held Zamir White to 1.8 yards a carry or whatever. And so they are showing in the media, and I think projecting to the team, a lot of healthy respect for Missouri and really putting forth the idea that they have improved. And I think they have something in their own team to point to as well. The offense wasn't playing well for South Carolina early in the season. They've seen even in their own organization, their own team, that you can play better than you were earlier in the year. And I think they are hammering that home about Missouri too on that side of the ball.
Yeah, I lied. I gave Missouri too much credit. They moved up to 129th in run defense, not 128th. So, up next, number 128, Kansas. So we'll see where it goes. Flip sides of the ball. I mean, when I'm looking through South Carolina's stats, they just nothing stands. Like there's not a thing like Missouri's run defense where you go they're terrible at that. I don't know if there's anything that I look and say they're great. Like their stats just look like that should be about a 4-5 football team, right? and I mean that's what they are.
Yeah, I mean. Competition adjusted. I think when you look at, they got beat on pretty badly by Tennessee. That got out of hand. Texas A&M. They performed really well in other games. They did a great job against Florida, and Dan Mullen defensively. I think the strength of this team is on the defensive front. They have a guy in J.J. Enagbare who is, a first or second round pick after this year. They have another former 5-star in Zach Pickens. Jabari Ellis is playing well. Aaron Sterling's a super senior, this season, and they have some depth behind them. That's the strength. The secondary and linebackers, that was the biggest concern. They lost Sherrod Green, their starter, in the Georgia game on the second play earlier in the year, and so their depth has been stretched there. So that's been a little bit of an issue. They've had some issues in the run game there. The secondary carried the biggest questions because they had 3 transfers. And then they had 2 transfers, and then they had a couple NFL defections, including J.C. Horn. A lot of guys to replace there, a lot of depth issues. They have pieced that one together under the circumstances, I think, about as well as you could hope for. Jalen Foster's gone from a former walk-on to, a Thorpe Award semifinalist. So he's done a really good job too. I think that there's been progress there. Shane Beamer talks a lot about maximizing. Like he said, what are your expectations for this team? We want to maximize what this team could be. Offensively, they hadn't done that until last week. Special teams, they've been very good. Sometimes the number 1 ranked special teams in the country. Defensively, I don't know if they've totally, completely maximized it because some of their rough performances, but they've come close. And so this is a team that they've still struggled against the run some. They've still given up explosive plays, but they've been solid for the most part, and they've done pretty well in the takeaway department as well.
Shane Beamer. By the way, I want to hear the first coach that says, "What are your expectations?" I'd really like to minimize what we can be. I'd like to hit the low end of what I see.
Yeah.
But no, yeah. Shane Beamer, I was talking to somebody else that covers Missouri, and I've had this impression all year, and he just said, look, I don't know if he's a great coach or not, but he just seems like a really normal dude. Like a pretty likable guy that has a reasonable outlook, which is not necessarily something we get to cover a lot.
Yeah, no, it's very true. He's a different kind of guy. You hear that sometimes as like a buzzword about a coach, but he's got a little bit more of an edge, I think, than sometimes he even portrays publicly. He's a very positive guy, though, which I think this team needed after last year. Just didn't go well. So he's been overwhelmingly positive, both publicly and even behind the scenes. He understands media. He understands branding. He understands getting out in the community. He does those things, and he's on social media a lot. So he's kind of got his way that he wants to go about doing things. And a lot of it is about connectivity and love and those things like that. And culture, every coach talks about culture, the buzzword, it's annoying. With Beamer, I've got to say, I think some of the stuff, and you hear this from people around the program, like there is a real aspect to it. He is a pretty genuine guy, I think. That's what people walk away with. And I think that's also evident by the way that, yeah, the record's not there in year one, but by the way, the team has continued to respond and continued to play hard, and then they get a result last week in the form of beating Florida.
Yeah, I did see on Twitter earlier this week, and I think I forget, but I think it was one of his kids. He was like, his kid asked him not to ruin his birthday by losing to Florida, or maybe his wife's birthday or something like that. I thought that was pretty good.
Well, and Beamer's son Hunter, I think he's 8, and this guy is a handful, man. I mean, he's around a lot, running around all the prospect camps. He's out there every day, running around, sweating. And there was another one from earlier this year where it was before the season, I think, and Beamer was telling the story. He said, yeah, Hunter came up to me and he was like, Dad. He's like, what, buddy? He's like, try not to get fired this year. So he gives him a hard time, man. He's like an 11th coach out there or something, or a 12th coach out there.
That's awesome. Speaking of South Carolina coaches doing things on social media, look, I am a huge Frank Martin fan. I have said that forever. Like, I love the fact that he just went out and told a fan basically to shut up and quit being a clown. That's my favorite thing that I've seen. And, like, I know it's probably stupid and he shouldn't do it, but I still think it was awesome.
He does that a lot, actually. He'll go through some little spurts where he'll call some people out. We kind of have a little joke about it here in Columbia in the media where, I mean, if you come sideways at Frank on social media, you better be ready to receive a response and a lot of times to get embarrassed because he will come at it with some ammo.
I mean, look, I know everybody's starting. Missouri started basketball season Tuesday night. I mean, what's that look like in South Carolina this year? Are there expectations, or are they just kind of in the middle of this big slog in the SEC where I think Missouri is and I think a number of teams are?
Yeah, that's the thing, man. Like, who emerges from that slog? I think in terms of the fan base and the expectations, it's kind of a wait and see for a couple reasons. Number one, just how some of the past years have gone. We really thought in the offseason there might be a new regime. I mean, but Frank is back. He's re-energized. It's been really interesting to watch. And he's got a team that's so new, it's hard to even put expectations on it. 3 new freshmen, a bunch of transfers. I think they have 9 new guys or something like that. A lot of defections in the offseason, a lot of guys brought in. But he's got an interesting group, and it's kind of like a Frank Martin team. Like, when you think about a Frank Martin team, this is kind of it. Like, guys that hustle, they play defense. They have some different skill sets. A guy like Eric Stevenson who transferred in. Chico Carter, James Reese from North Texas. They made a run last year. A.J. Wilson. He's got a lot of interesting guys. And so I think there's some cautious optimism. Fans, I think, want them to get through this first part of the season before conference play without, like, dropping a game to Rider or something. Rider may be like a Sweet 16 team. I don't know, but I know they play Rider.
Not, but you never can tell.
Right. Well, that's typically in the past few years, there have been, like, a couple or a handful of losses that are just totally inexplicable. That's kind of haunted this team, and so I think that's what people want to see. But they've only had one exhibition game and one game against USC Upstate. Nobody's going to give them a medal for beating USC Upstate. But when you just watch this team, interesting pieces. So I'd say there's some intrigue around it. And leave it at that.
All right, we'll finish up. Last thing, back to the football game. Just I don't love to do predictions because we already do enough predictions places people get mad at us. But South Carolina wins this game if what? Like, if you can boil this down to one thing that they've got to do on Saturday, what is it?
Well, I would say it's to prey on what has been for most of the season Missouri's weakness, but also most of the season South Carolina's weakness. That's run the football. Like I get irritated because like every single game you could put up a key to the game and say, run the ball, stop the run. But like it is important in this one because we know Missouri struggled. We know South Carolina struggled when they haven't run the ball. So that's kind of one of those something's got to give things. So South Carolina needs to run the ball effectively, and they need to limit turnovers on the road. You're going to have a quarterback making his first SEC road start in Jason Brown. They've had some turnover issues on offense. Do that. and I think they'll have a decent chance to walk away with a road win.
All right, so we've talked a lot about Missouri's quarterback situation. South Carolina's is pretty interesting. They've played 3 dudes this season. Jason Brown, as you heard there from Chris, is the guy in there right now. But let's take a look at some of the numbers here. And the truth is, guys, this is, as I was on a show on Gamecock Central shortly after we recorded that, and they accurately called it strength on strength and weakness on weakness. Missouri has been a pretty solid offensive team most of the season. Not great, but pretty solid. South Carolina's been a pretty solid defensive team. South Carolina has been a terrible offensive team, and Missouri has been a terrible defensive team. South Carolina is, last year, Kevin Williams ran the ball. He led the SEC in rushing. I'm sorry, Kevin Harris led the SEC in rushing last year. This year, he's not even South Carolina's leading rusher, but they have nobody that's run for 400 yards. They're averaging 135 a game, which is, 33 yards less a game than Missouri. South Carolina's turning the ball over 2 times per game, which includes they have fumbled in 9 games. They have fumbled 19 times. They've lost 11 of those, recovered 8 of them themselves. I mean, this is a toss-up in every sense of the word. Missouri opened the week as a 3-point favorite. South Carolina now, I believe, is a 1.5-point favorite. But Missouri's offense is the better unit. South Carolina's defense is the better unit. So I don't know if it comes down to which strength is better or which weakness is better. To roll through some of the things you guys might have to say about this one. Todd says, for Drink's love of Spurrier, you think he'd have a shorter leash with QBs. I don't know if Eli Drinkwitz loves Spurrier or if people have just kind of compared him to him. I'm not positive about that. Let's see. Andrew Kaufman tweeted a video of Basilak warming up. Yeah, that's what we expect. We expect him to go through warm-ups, and then we'll see. The quarterbacks usually come out and just do some light stuff first, right, along with the kickers. Like, it's nothing that really even tests you. They're not even in pads and uniform. It's kind of just tossing a ball around and seeing the field and all that. And then usually I want to say it's between like 215 and 225, the team will come back out, and that's when you can get a little bit better idea of, hey, who's in pads and who's in street clothes and who's maybe going through actual like game prep with their positions and all that. So that should be coming up in the next 10-15 minutes, and then we'll talk to Mitchell Forty here in about 20. Let's see. Obviously, winning a couple games would improve the morale around the program, but how important is a bowl game for this team? I mean, it's just momentum and feeling good going into the offseason. I mean, Missouri's got 3 games left. And individually, I think they can win all 3. I don't think they will win all 3 because this team hasn't shown me anything consistency-wise. I mean, they're 1-7 against in their last 8 against Power 5 competition. I think they just beat their first Power 5 team of the year in the Vanderbilt game. So, I don't think that there's anything that tells me Missouri is going to go 3-0, and that's not what I'm trying to say. I'm just saying individually these 3 games are winnable. South Carolina certainly winnable today. Florida right now, and this seems like a good time to look at some SEC scores, which I'm going to have to update. Florida right now is leading Samford 56-52 in the fourth quarter. It is the most points that an FCS team has ever scored against an SEC team. Let's take a look at this scoreboard, what's going on right now. New Mexico State not covering against Alabama 59-3. Tide was favored by 51 in that. Auburn led Mississippi State 28-3 in the second quarter. It's now 29-28 Pirates. And that is Samford 56-52 against Florida. Samford actually had the game tied on a touchdown, and that was called back on a penalty. Okay, Emory Jones just threw a touchdown pass, his 6th touchdown pass of the day. So Florida is now up 62-52. But look, that is reminiscent of the Missouri State game a few years ago, except actually even worse. Nothing that happens is going to make Florida fans feel okay. They can score 4 more touchdowns and win that game 90-52, and it doesn't matter. Samford offensively, I'm going to take a look at the numbers here real quick, and I know we're getting ahead of ourselves, but Samford has thrown for 410 yards. They have 521 yards of total offense against Florida, and there is 9 minutes to go in that game. So next week's game against Florida is absolutely winnable. Missouri's goal should clearly be a bowl game, but I don't think that can happen without a win today against South Carolina. As we take a look around the SEC East standings, Georgia's already got the thing locked up. They play Tennessee today. It's their last SEC game. It's their last chance to really lose. I don't think they're going to lose. They're a 20-point favorite in Knoxville. Tennessee has beaten Kentucky, so Tennessee could finish second, actually, in the West. In the East. I don't know my divisions. South Carolina, Florida, Missouri, they're kind of really at this point playing for fourth, which doesn't mean a whole lot. But, hey, if Missouri could win these next two, they're going to finish ahead of South Carolina and Florida in the division. That counts for something, right? It's better than the alternative. Vanderbilt down there in the cellar. Take a look over on the other side in the West. Heard a crazy stat on ESPN today. There is a way that this division can finish in a 6-way tie. Alabama, A&M, Ole Miss, Auburn, Mississippi State, and Arkansas could all still end up 5-3 in SEC play, which is just bonkers. Only LSU is out of it. So A&M plays at Ole Miss today. That's a good game. Mississippi State currently up 36-28 on Auburn, and then Arkansas is at LSU. Mitchell Forty has just told me that Connor Bazelak is dressed. He is on the field for warm-ups. He also just tweeted that. So that is not a guarantee that Bazelak is playing. It is not a guarantee that Bazelak is starting. I think that will be 100% determined in the next 15 or 20 minutes. But again, Connor Bazelak is on the field. He is dressed. He is warming up for Missouri. South Carolina and Mizzou get going here in about 45 minutes. We can't call it yet. The expectation, I think, is that Connor Bazelak is at quarterback. Now, again, I think this game's actually more on Missouri's defense. If they can approach what they did against Georgia, and look, they weren't great against Georgia. I mean, they gave up 500 yards. Let's not make it into something it wasn't. But they were better against the run. They were more physical up front. I thought they did a better job in that game than they've done in most games this year. If they can do something similar against South Carolina's running game, I don't think South Carolina has the personnel either at quarterback or on the outside that will allow them to throw the ball the way Georgia did. So if Missouri's defense can do something approaching what it did last week against Georgia, and then whoever it is at quarterback, can move the ball a little bit, I think Missouri could win. Or should win, I should say. Cam says, am I crazy for thinking the way the QB situation is being handled has the potential to blow up in their faces? Could end up with 2, if not all 3, put off at the way it's been handled come season's end. It's possible. And now, look, I don't think all 3 are transferring, right? But this is what I wrote about after maybe after the Georgia game. I wrote about this. But I said that the way Drinkwitz handled the QB situation over the next 4 weeks was hugely important. And the reason is that you probably are losing one of these guys to transfer. Whether it's after the season or after spring football, either Connor Bazelak or Tyler Macon or Brady Cook is going to know he's the third-string quarterback. And he's going to know that means he's not going to start and probably not going to play. That guy is very likely to transfer. Now, I think the least likely to transfer in that situation would be Macon just because he's the youngest. But, even so, if he comes out of spring football third string and he knows Sam Horn's coming in, I think there's certainly a possibility that he would leave. So you've got to count on one of these guys leaving after the year. Whether it's, if Bazelak feels like he's gotten passed up and wants to grad transfer, whether it's Cook feels like he's third string or didn't get a fair shot and he wants to go, whether maybe it's Macon, who knows. I think you just have to count on one of them probably leaving. That's the nature of the position. What you can't have is two of them leaving. What you can't have is Brady Cook saying, I don't think I'm ever really going to get my shot here, and Bazelak saying, well, I feel like I've been passed up and I need to grad transfer. And then you're going into next season with Sam Horn and one other guy on the roster. That can't work. You've got to keep two of these three guys around. And I know the week after the Vanderbilt game, Drinkwitz was asked about, handling quarterbacks and all that. And he said, you can't make decisions out of fear that guys are going to get mad at it. And I respect him saying it, but I don't think it's really true. You have to have that in mind a little bit. Hey, what's going to happen? Now, look, you play the best guys, but there are ways to handle it over the next 3 weeks that can keep at least two of them here. And I think it is very important that Drinkwitz does it that way. Adam says all three won't end up in the portal. That's certainly true. Will Dan Mullen be coaching against Missouri next week? I think it's very much in question, guys. If Florida manages to somehow lose that game, which I don't think they will, but if they do lose that game, I think Dan Mullen is fired on Sunday, if not today. But even if they win, I think he's got to – I think he's probably coming back next week, maybe. I don't know. It's certainly possible that Missouri is not facing Dan Mullen next week. So be interesting to see what happens there. Let's see. Justin Ferguson joining us with ribs on the grill. Appreciate that. Adam says Dave's tweet suggests the crowd won't be great today. I haven't seen Dave's tweet. I don't expect a real good crowd. It's the first day of deer season. It's pretty cold out. Missouri's not that good. The opponent's not that good. A lot of things going against them. So, Dan asks, is it safe to say this is the biggest game of Drinkwitz's career in Columbia? We've asked that like 5 weeks in a row, honestly. I don't know. Ultimately, I don't know how big this game is. Yeah, you'd like to win. A game against 5-4 South Carolina to make the Birmingham Bowl. I don't really think it's the biggest game of his career. But hey, he needs to win, no question. Let's see. Sounded like Beatty could run for 200 yards today. I think that's true virtually every day for Missouri. Drink should be giving Macon a series, a half, or a game like Pinkel used to. I don't understand why. I don't know what he did last week to indicate to you that he is ready to be the quarterback of an offense that does anything other than run the ball. Again, it's confirmation bias off last week. If you went into that game thinking Tyler Macon is the future, then that game alone was not going to change your mind. And I'm not saying he's not the future. He may be the future. He is not the present, guys. He is 6 of 12 on balls that have been thrown less than 10 yards down the field. It's not good enough. Connor Bazelak's percentage on those same passes is 85%. Brady Cook is 100. He's completed every pass he's thrown of less than 10 yards. Now, he hasn't thrown a ton of them, but he's thrown as many as Tyler Macon has. And I just don't I don't understand how you're advocating if you're trying to win games, giving him a series, a half right now. I just don't see it. And I don't have anything against Tyler Macon at all. Seems like a good kid. Everybody says he's a good leader. He was a really successful high school quarterback who could still very well be a really successful college quarterback. But this idea that, again, if you're out on Connor Bazelak, you are. That's fine. And I'm not going to argue with you that he's the guy for this team. Eli Drinkwitz thinks he is, but I'm not going to argue with you. But I don't understand how you can watch that game and think that for a full game, Tyler Macon is a better option than Brady Cook right now. It doesn't. And if you don't think he's the better option for a full game, I don't understand the argument of, well, he still has to play. if you've got a package for him, if he comes in at the goal line, if you've got a certain play for him, if you've got a handful of plays for him where you're running 4 or 5 plays and then running a trick play off of that, I'm fine with it. The idea of putting him in for a full series where you are going to have, at some point, have to throw the ball, I just don't see, guys. I could be wrong. I just don't see it, and here's why. Todd says, is Macon really that much better of a runner than Cook? Based on what I saw last week, no. Maybe a little better. Might have a few more moves. Maybe he's more athletic. I think Brady Cook might be faster based on watching last week's game. But Cook ran 10 times for 32, Macon 11 for 42. Pretty close. Macon had a 20-yard run. I think Cook's longest was like 9 or 10. But my whole argument is based on this. Cook as a runner is closer to Macon than Macon as a passer is to Cook. I think that is inarguable, to be quite honest with you. P. Richards says the Birmingham Bowl is taking shots out of nowhere. Look, the Birmingham Bowl should take shots, between Macon and Cook, Cook should obviously get the nod right now. Again, completely agree. And Floyd the Barber says, do you think last week's performance is who he is? Couldn't it be that last week's game he was too amped up in his first big game? Sure. But it was Brady Cook's first game too. And Brady Cook was better. I mean, they played the same defense. They played the same team, and Brady Cook was better. So for now, Brady, in the present, I am not talking about next year or 2 years down the road or anything. For now, if Connor Bazelak can't play, I think Brady Cook is the better option. And I think it's all moot because I think Connor Bazelak's going to play today. Now, how long he stays in and all that obviously remains to be seen. Adam says people fall in love with how many stars were next to their name in recruiting, and there's no question that's a part of this. And it's the one part I really hate about what we do. It sets up expectations for these kids that aren't always fair and that people never let go of. I mean, for example, people are talking about Dan Mullen being a bad coach but a good recruiter. Well, Rival says he's a good recruiter. He has a bad team. Maybe that means he's not that good a recruiter, right? Speaking of which, Florida is now up 70-52 on Samford, so I'm pretty sure Florida is going to survive, but not a very good game for the Gators. Oklahoma losing to Baylor. Michigan just went on top of Penn State with 3:30 to play. Mississippi State ahead and moving on Auburn. It was 28-3. It is now 36-28. Mississippi State has scored 33 consecutive points. I'm sure that will go over very well in Auburn. Breakfast King says, I don't want to see Macon playing regular snaps until he stops throwing the sidearm missiles on short passes. Adam hopes Mizzou makes the Christmas Day Bowl. That makes one of us. I've already promised there will be no pregame or postgame show if that happens. Todd wants Mizzou to get Mullen fired next week. I think that is possible. That definitely could happen. Again, I think he's going to survive this week. He would not, I don't think, survive a loss at Missouri. Their last 2 games, they're going to be, after this week, let me look at it. Florida will be 5-5. They need one more win simply to qualify for a bowl game. They play Missouri and Florida State. I was going to say they'll be favored in both those games. I'm not sure that's true. But I think if Dan Mullen loses either of those, he's done. I think if he loses in Missouri next week, he would be fired before getting a chance to even play Florida State. Adam wants to know if there could be a blizzard in Como next week. Early forecast I saw today is like upper 40s, I think, so no blizzard, but we shall see how that goes. And again, these Florida kids, I understand the weather thing, but a lot of Missouri's kids are from warm weather places too. I'm not sure that the weather has quite as big a factor on these games as we think. Real quick, before Mitchell Forty does call in, which he's going to be doing here in the next 5 minutes or so, and we'll get kind of an update from Faurot Field. I do want to remind you guys about Colin Gentry Law Group. They make this possible for us to hang out for about an hour and a half every week. And hang on, Mitchell just tweeted that Mekhi Wingo is out and Hiron White is on the field warming up along with Bazelak. So those were the three questionable players. White and Bazelak on the field warming up. Mekhi Wingo in street clothes probably won't play. So that's the update. But again, want to remind you about the fine folks and our friends at the Call Gentry Law Group in Jefferson City, Missouri. Don't think you have to be located in Jefferson City to use them. Don't think you have to be located in the state of Missouri to use them. They've done things outside the state all over the country, so they certainly can help you out with any legal needs or questions you have. You can go to callgentry.com and schedule a consultation. You can call them at 573-691-4552. They can handle all kinds of areas: wrongful death, personal injury, licensing, family law, criminal law, business litigation, corporate law. They can do anything you need. Somebody in their offices is capable of it. That is callgentry.com or 573-691-4552. So get in touch with them if you need anything on the legal front. We hope you don't, but if you do, get in touch with our friends at Call Gentry. If you need anything on the football front, you hang out with us for the next 20 minutes or so. Again, Mitchell Forty going to be calling in pretty soon. Want to take one more look at some of these numbers. And I've said, I think this game is about the Missouri quarterback, but I think it's more about the Missouri defense. Because if they can do something like what they did last week, then I think you're going to hold South Carolina to, 20-ish points. And that should give you a pretty good chance to win the game. I will be interested to see. I would take the same approach Missouri took against Georgia last week, which is a whole lot of blitzes and seven-man boxes and trying to do everything you can to take the run away from South Carolina. If Jason Brown, an FCS transfer, is going to beat you throwing the football, then he's just going to beat you throwing the football, and there's not a whole lot you can do about it. But as a defensive coach, you've got to understand we can't take away everything. If I'm Missouri, I'm taking away the run, and I'm dealing with South Carolina, throwing the football a little bit. And if they do, they do, and you go home with a loss, and you're not going to a bowl game in all likelihood, and everything is all done. Ryan says, I would like Missouri to do something with quarterback runs like Baylor does. Opens up everything for the team. And look, quarterback runs it's a very good thing to have, right? But I think we've gotten to this point because Bazelak has been so immobile, whether it has been an unwillingness or an inability to run, I can't say. But we have gotten to a point where people are forgetting the main job of the quarterback. Yes, you'd love a mobile quarterback, but he's got to be able to throw the football. I mean, he's got to. It's still his job. The comparison I made is saying that you would rather have, Macon than Bazelak because Macon can run the ball right now is like saying you would rather play Dawson Downing at tailback than Tyler Beatty because Downing's a better pass blocker. But that is a secondary part of his job. The quarterback still has to be able to throw the football. And I know the reply is, well, Bazelak can't throw the football. We can't ever get the ball more than 3 yards downfield. These, anybody can complete those passes. Except that's not true, and we saw it last week. We saw it last week, guys. So ultimately, we're going to have an answer to this in 30 minutes. And I think that, the answer is going to be if Connor Bazelak has gone through warm-ups and feels okay, Connor Bazelak's going to be the guy on the field starting the game. I will be very surprised if that is not the case. If he is not on the field, it is almost certainly going to be Brady Cook. We shall see. Again, Mitchell Forty going to be checking in shortly from Faroe Field, and we will get an update just to kind of run down what he has said so far. It is that Connor Bazelak is on the field in warmups. Hiron White, who is questionable, is on the field in warmups. Mekhi Wingo, who was questionable, is on the field in street clothes. So that is where that stands as of right now, 30 minutes before before kick. Let's go now to that phone line, and Mitchell Forty is with us. And Mitch, assuming you can hear me, what's going on, man?
Yep, I can hear you. Hopefully you all can hear me. Mizzou's on the field warming up, and Connor Bazelak is among them. So that is my news.
Okay, so and like we are at the point now where Missouri is actually doing like the full pregame warm up. It's not Bazelak like walking around and tossing the ball in shorts.
Yeah. So no, he's in full pads and full uniform with everyone else. He's out there, he was taking snaps with Michael Maietti, the first team center, throwing passes in the warm-up lines with everyone else. I mean, it looks to me like he's going to start.
Yeah, if he's taking snaps from Maietti, he is the starter. The only way I see that changing is if sometime in the next 15 minutes he goes to Eli Drinkwitz and says, hey, I can't do this. And, I mean, I know it's tough to tell, but any idea, like, does he, are you watching him and he appears to be somewhat normal or
Yeah, I mean, I kept an eye on him a little bit, but I haven't seen him try to move too much. I mean, he's taking snaps, handing the ball off, throwing passes, in the receiver lines, not too much. I mean, he looks normal to me, looks like the other quarterbacks, but I haven't seen him try to run away from a pass rusher or anything like that.
Yeah, any indication? I mean, I know we've been saying all show, and you posted this morning, we are pretty confident that Brady Cook is the backup, but anything you can tell in that as far as like who's going through things with who in warm-ups?
No, nothing like that quite yet. I mean, the quarterbacks kind of rotate through, doing stuff in warm-ups. I still feel confident that if they had to make a move away from Connor Bazelak, especially if it was early in the game, not like a Vanderbilt type situation where they're trying to run out the clock or something, I think they would cut a Brady Cook. But they haven't, done their walkthroughs yet where they do, kind of first and second team stuff. So I'll keep an eye out for that.
Yeah, and this is all unknowable, but it's interesting to me twofold. Number one, is the plan to play Bazelak every snap if he can? And number two, how short's the leash here? I mean, if we're mid-second quarter and Missouri's down 10-0 and not moving the ball, does he finally go to Brady Cook? Because he never has until he's been forced to. So obviously none of these are things we know. It's just things that'll be interesting to watch.
Yeah, I definitely agree. That's something I'll be interested in as well. If this changes, like you said, the very long leash that Connor Bazelak has had all season. I assume that, obviously we assume that Bazelak's going to start because Drinkwitz has stuck with him all year when he's been healthy. But if he does show signs of being limited, even maybe beyond what he did against, say, early in the Vanderbilt game or against Tennessee or Texas A&M, I would think that the staff would make a change. But like you said, we can't know until we see it.
Right. The other injury stuff, I know that you tweeted that Hiron White appears to be on the field in uniform. Mekhi Wingo appears to be in street clothes, and those were really the only question marks we had coming in, right?
Yep. Those were the only players listed as questionable, and so Hiron White is out there wearing full uniform. Looks like he's going to go, and Mekhi Wingo is out today. Okay,
so the interesting thing to me, I was saying, will be I mean, I know the quarterback talk is obviously going to dominate everything, but to me this game's more about, hey, did the Missouri defense actually improve last week, or did it just kind of, hey, they sold out to stop the run and Georgia still put up 500 yards on them, and this is the same defense we've seen most of the season. To me, this game's on the Missouri defense every bit as much as it is the quarterback, because South Carolina's offense really hadn't been any good this year.
Yep, totally agree. I think that's the big question mark. And South Carolina's offense looked good against Florida last week when Florida's given up 52 points to Samford. Clearly they have quit. I think that obviously if Missouri lets South Carolina line up and run the ball like we've seen some teams run it against Missouri this season, that could be a major issue. That's probably the biggest kind of X factor in this game. But it's not like this is some dominant offensive unit that's been able to move the ball at will this season. So you would think that if Missouri's defense did make any strides, that it would be able to slow down the South Carolina offense. Yeah,
so we're sitting here with 3 weeks to go in the season. Missouri's got to win 2 games. The next game is, like you said, against a Florida team that is currently leading Samford 70-52, who I don't really know who the head coach of that team will be come next Saturday, to be quite honest. But I still maintain if Missouri's going to get to a bowl game, that has to include a win today. If you lose this game, I just don't see any way you're beating Florida and Arkansas.
Yeah, I completely agree. I actually think, this game hasn't gotten a lot of buzz, and that's not a surprise. I mean, it's, two of the lesser teams in the SEC East, and, at this point they're playing for, maybe one of them's going to go to the Birmingham Bowl. But it's actually a really big game for both teams in terms of, whether or not they're going to qualify for the postseason and just how they feel about the year. I mean, if you're Missouri, and you lose this game, you're basically definitively saying we're the second worst team in the SEC ahead of only Vanderbilt, and that hardly counts. That's a decent chance you finish the year with that as your only Power 5 win. And Vanderbilt is really bad. So that would definitely leave a tough taste in I think people's mouths. On the flip side, you win, you're probably favored against Florida here at home next week, or at least very close to it. And you got that to get to 6-6, and it would be pretty easy, I think, for the coaching staff to spin it and say, look, we were left for dead midseason, had a quarterback injury, rallied together, got to a bowl game, treaded water with a 500 record.
Yeah, no question. So, last thing, just I know it's cold outside, although it is like sunny. It's a lot nicer than it was this morning, but pretty cold. I've heard a rumor that it's the first day of deer season. Are there going to be people at the stadium?
There will be some. I don't think it's in danger of being a sellout or anything. There will be some people. There are some people here. I don't know how many. I don't think it's going to be the heaviest crowd. It's really actually a pretty nice day for football. I mean, it's chilly. It's like 42, but it's sunny. It's not super breezy. But yeah, I think that there will be more people in deer stands than in Thoreau Field this morning throughout the state.
All right, man. Well, appreciate you checking in. We'll let you go. If you get any sort of update here in the next 10 minutes or so before we sign off, shoot me a text, and we'll tell everybody that Tommy Locke is starting at quarterback against South Carolina.
Sounds good.
All right. Have a good one. That is Mitchell Forty from Thoreau Field, and he will have complete coverage for you guys all day long at Power Mizzou, game thread and updates and all that during the game. Plenty of post-game coverage. I will be here with you for another handful of minutes. We'll check some scores and all that before we log off, check some comments. And actually, if you guys want to start throwing up your predictions real quick, throw them up. We'll take a look at those the last few minutes before we log off. I want to remind you, after the game, which should be in the neighborhood of 6:30. Some of that, it could be a little earlier, could be a little bit later, depending obviously on how everything goes, but should be in the neighborhood of 6:30. After the game ends, Mitch will go do the post-game interviews with Drinkwitz and whatever players are available. I will start the Boulevard Brewing Company post-game drink. It usually takes me 10 to 15 minutes after the game ends to get all the graphics and numbers and everything updated. But the reason you want to subscribe to the channel while you're here is so that you will get an alert and let you know when we go live. Again, it should be 10, 15 minutes after the game. The nighttime post-game shows tend to be a little bit better. Sometimes people have, maybe had a couple libations throughout the day, and they're a little bit looser with their words and their emotions. So, the nighttime post-game shows can be fun, the prime times. There will be some decent games on tonight that I'm sure you guys will watch while sitting here that I will miss. But hope you're all here with us for the postgame show 10 or 15 minutes after this one ends. We are about 20 minutes away from kickoff. Again, it is on the SEC network. It is on the Tiger Radio network, should that choose to be the way that you consume things. Mizzou leads this series 6-5. It's been a really competitive series. You go back to, even before they were in the SEC together, that 2005 Independence Bowl, that South Carolina jumped out 21-0, and then Marcus King had the interception return, 99 yards for a touchdown, which maybe is the biggest play of the Gary Pinkel era at Missouri, to be quite honest, because without that play, a lot of things might go differently. Brad Smith has a great second half in his last game, and Missouri comes back and gets the win. I can't even remember the final score, 41-38, somewhere around that, in that Independence Bowl. And then since joining the SEC, obviously in 2013, the overtime field goal off the upright, Missouri's only loss of the season. The next year they came back, and South Carolina was dominating that game until early fourth quarter, and then Missouri, Matty Mock just kind of wakes up from the dead, and Missouri wins at 21-20. The crazy game a couple years ago in Columbia East with 2 weather delays where South Carolina just, kind of inexplicably ended up winning that game. Last year, Mizzou wins 17-10 in Columbia, South Carolina, which was a game that didn't feel that close. It felt like Missouri should have won that by quite a bit more, but kind of continued to let South Carolina hang around. So 6-5 Mizzou in a series that's been pretty good. Don't know how many more times we'll see it once Texas and OU join the league, to be quite honest. But it's been a pretty entertaining series, and dare I say the closest thing Missouri's had to an actual rivalry in this league since joining. So ask for your predictions, and we've got some of them, and so I want to roll through some of those real quick. Stewart says 35-24 Mizzou. I guess that should say if Cook plays. Be interested to know what your prediction is if Cook doesn't play. Tiercell says South Carolina 34-24, but hopes he is wrong. P. Richards predicts that Missouri runs for 276 yards. That's a very specific prediction. Adam says 38-17 South Carolina, which seems very pessimistic to me. Breakfast King says Mizzou 42-38 in double overtime. Man, Breakfast King, why you got to do that to me? I hope you're wrong. No double overtime, man. Whatever the score is, let's just get it over in regulation, preferably in 3 hours or less. That's my goal. Jared says if Bazelak starts, I don't have any confidence he's healthy enough to win. I think Cook gives us the best chance. Concept Check picks Missoula 27-24. It is the Montana State High School playoffs, so Billings East will probably be disappointed if that's the result. Just kidding, man. I'm familiar with autocorrect and autofill and all that. So Stewart, who had said 35-24 if Cook plays, says 24-17 South Carolina if Bazelak plays. So Brady Cook 18 points better than Bazelak in Stewart's mind. Floyd the Barber says South Carolina 45-31. Bazelak with 2 interceptions as I drastically mess up the schedule graphic there. T-Rise goes on the record with 24-17 Mizzou. And Concept Check going ahead and getting an early start on the Monday night hoops game against UMKC, picking Missouri. I picked Missouri 30-27. Here's the entire basis for the pick, guys. I have no clue. If these teams play 10 times, I think probably 6 to 8 of them are close games. One's a South Carolina blowout and one's a Missouri blowout. I don't know what to expect. So when I don't know what to expect, I just pick the things that's going to make you guys happy, and that is a Missouri win. So I picked Missouri 30-27. I'm more interested in seeing the quarterback stuff. How close to healthy is Bazelak? If he's not close to healthy, if things aren't going well, is there a hook that we haven't seen all year? I don't know. I don't know what to expect. It's going to be interesting to watch, certainly. Again, we will talk about it all. We will break it all down on our postgame show here in the neighborhood of 6:30. Hope that you all can join us for that. Appreciate everybody who was here. If you were here, just before you log off, and let's get to one last prediction. Dan picks South Carolina 38-20. Missouri scores late, and all 3 quarterbacks play. So that would certainly be interesting. I don't think that's out of the question that we see them all 3 take a snap. And maybe throw Tyler Beatty in there for a Wildcat snap. So over-under set on guys that take a snap for Missouri today, set at 3.5. I'll be interesting to see how it goes. But appreciate you all being here. Before you do log off and go watch the game or listen to the game or whatever you're doing for the game, hit the like button on the channel and subscribe. I want to thank our friends at Call and Gentry Law Group one more time. You can go online at callgentry.com to schedule the consultation. You can give them a call at 573-691-4552 down in Jefferson City. They will, great customer service, fantastic people down there. Met most of them in person, if not all of them. They have taken care of me in a number of different ways over the years, and I can personally recommend their services. Call and Gentry Law Group. They make this show possible every week for you guys and for me, so appreciate them doing that. We'll have 2 more of them, only 2 weeks left in the regular season, but Week 10 about to get underway. 15 minutes from Faurot Field. Follow Mitchell 40 for full coverage all day long. Join me here about 6:30, 10, 15 minutes after the game for the post-game drink. Full game day experience, Mizzou and South Carolina coming your way. Thanks for hanging out with us, guys. We'll talk to you in about 4 hours.